Hi, the Mudbrooker here. Today I'm going to show you how to make a very simple chicken soup with homemade noodles. As always, the first and most important ingredient in any recipe is alcohol. And since I'm making chicken soup, I of course will be drinking ouzo. God damn, you gotta love them Greeks. Anyway, being chicken soup, you will of course need chicken. Exactly what kind of chicken doesn't really matter. I always buy whatever's on sale. And since chicken drumsticks were on sale, that's what I'll be using. Chicken thighs work great, chicken breasts. You can cut up a whole chicken if you want, whatever's cheapest. Simply take your chicken. This is about 3 pounds. You want 2 to 3 pounds worth of chicken. Put it in a large pot. Cover your chicken with water. Oh, a couple, 3 quarts worth, all depends on how big your pot is. Give it a little salt and pepper. Go easy on the salt at this stage because we'll be adding salt and other things to it later, so you don't want to get too salty right now. A little bit of pepper. And we'll put this on the stove and bring it to a boil. Alright, we've come to a boil, and I apologize for the odd camera angle, but that's just the way it's going to have to work out. And you'll notice that this has got some foam on top. Kind of ugly looking. That brown stuff is mostly from the blood that's been drawn out of the chicken. You can skim some of this off now, but the foam will come back. But you don't have to worry about it too overly much because as you cook this, that foam will break down again and it'll disappear on its own. But I do like to get the first bit of kind of crude looking stuff off the top. All we have to do now is let this simmer until the chicken is cooked. It'll take about a half hour, and I will come back and show you what we got then. Okay, it's been about a half hour and I'm back. You can see that that scum on top is pretty much broken up and gone away. And the chicken has been simmered to the point where it's cooked through. If it's just a little tiny bit underdone right next to the bone, don't panic because it'll get cooked more later. For right now, what we want to do is take the chicken out. Do this right-handed instead of left. You want to take your chicken out and let it cool off enough that you can handle it. That'll take a few minutes, and once it's ready to be touched, I will be back. And there's your chicken cooked. Okay, the chicken is cooled down enough that I'm not going to burn myself handling it, so we're ready for the next step. We're going to take the meat off of the bone. You're going to take any bits of skin, throw them back into your pot, pick the meat off. I'll cut it up later. A couple little bits there, that can go in. And it's a pretty simple matter, just peeling it off of the bone. If you get a few little bits in there, don't worry. Like I said, we're going to clean it up later. And if there's any meat left on there, that's okay. That'll go into our broth. Now, something we want to do is break the bones. Usually, you can just snap them, but if they don't want to snap, take the back of a fairly heavy knife, give it a rap, and it should break right off. So I'll go through this and peel off all of the bits and pieces that we need to peel off. And if it's a tiny bit, like I said before, if it's a tiny bit underdone right next to the bone, don't get too excited because that will be cooked more later. But if it's really raw, well, you didn't cook it enough, so that was your fault. Alright, through the magic of video editing, I got my hands clean and got everything cleaned up here on the counter. Take a little bit of your broth and ladle it over your meat. Cover this with some plastic wrap or a plate or something and set it aside. We'll cut this up later. Now what I'm going to do now, we got all of our bones and skin in the pot. I'll add some more water to this and I'll put it back on the burner and let it simmer. You want to simmer it for at least an hour, but if you have other things to do like I do today, you can let it simmer as long as you want to. While that's simmering, I'll get on with some of my other chores and I'll come back and show you how to make the noodles. Okay, now we're going to start making some noodles. This is 2.5 to 3 cups worth of all-purpose flour. Exactly how much doesn't really matter because this is all done by eye. A good pinch of salt. And now we start adding eggs. I'll start off with 4 of them, although I'll probably end up using 5 or 6. Now that you've got your eggs in there, get your hands in and start mixing it around. Yes, this is going to be messy. Yes, this is going to be sloppy, but hey, that's half the fun of cooking. You could do this in a stand mixer up to a point. Once it starts coming together, this will be a very stiff dough. And once it gets there, most stand mixers just don't quite have the horsepower to handle it. I suppose if you had a real industrial grade one, you probably get away with it. But your average KitchenAid, it's not quite going to do it. So we get in here and we knead. Don't worry about getting flour on the counter because we'll probably need a little bit there later on anyhow. And I can tell already that this is probably going to need at least one more egg. You want this to be fairly stiff and dry. You know, it's kind of a judgment call. But you need enough moisture to bring it all together, but not much more than that. So yeah, I'll give that one more egg for sure. Try not to get any shells in there. And break that up and work it on in. Every now and then you gotta get the stuff off of your hands because that's a lot wetter than what's in the bowl, and you want to work everything into it good. It's pretty sticky at this point, but just keep at it. I'll probably edit out a little bit of my mixing, or not, I haven't really decided yet. Get back here, you. What you're trying to get is something that when you squeeze it, it comes together and stays together. But there's still quite a bit of flour that isn't really mixed in very well, so I think I will add one more egg, and that should do it. Get some of these little bits here that are floating around. Yeah, one more. Like I say, it takes a little bit of practice, but not much. You can tell when it's coming together because it'll start making a decent little ball in there. That's pretty good. Now at this stage, we're starting to form a ball. And if it needs a little bit more moisture, I think another egg would be too much. I think we're about right. But if you do need a little bit more moisture to it to get it to come together, get your hands wet and mix that in. You don't usually need more than a couple of teaspoons of water to get it all to work together. Kind of press it down in there and pick up that stuff on the bottom. Roll it around a little bit. And we got a ball. But I think that will need just a tiny bit more liquid. Wipe my hands off. I'll be right back. And when I say get your hands wet, that's what I mean. That's maybe a teaspoon worth of water. And that was enough to get it to pick up the rest of the flour. We're going to take this now, round up all our little stray bits, and we got to knead this. Set this aside. This is the hard part because this is a pretty stiff dough, and you'll need to knead it a bit. Really lean into it. If your hands and wrists aren't up to this, well, you'll just have to find somebody to knead your noodles. You'll notice I'm not putting any flour down because this is pretty stiff and it doesn't really stick. If it does stick, you got too much liquid in it. Put a little flour down and work that into the dough. Okay, that feels pretty smooth. Worked through pretty good. But if you try and roll this out now, it just ain't gonna happen. This is very rubbery and it will pull back. So what we have to do is flatten it out a bit, put it back in the bowl, cover it with some plastic and let it rest. And let me rest too. That's kind of a workout. Let that sit and rest for a half hour, 45 minutes, and we'll be back. Alright, my skin and bones and broth is simmering away merrily. My noodle dough has been resting for, well, a while. I've been busy with some other things. It actually sat for probably about an hour. Usually you don't need it to go that long the first time. And we're ready to start rolling this out. This will probably take 2 or 3 rollings and restings because this dough is pretty rubbery generally. Although it's rested long enough that I can see it's rolling out fairly well right now. Usually what happens is this stuff wants to spring right back when you try to roll it out. So what I'm going to do, she's sticking just a little bit too. Not too bad. But I'll roll that out a little bit and fold it up and let it rest again. That way it'll roll out even easier next time I roll it. I just pick it up, put it in quarters, and put it back in the bowl. Let it set, and I'll be back in a little while. Alrighty, this has been resting for about 20 minutes or so, and we're going to take this out and give it another roll and then resting. I said this is just a little bit sticky. Normally it just unfolds real easy, but you can see it sticking together, and my dog is ringing the bell because he wants out. And I'm just going to ignore him because I just brought him back in. Anyway, get her all unfolded and roll it out again. We'll rest this one more time before we give it a final rolling and cutting. In the meantime, a couple little pockets of flour in there, but that ain't going to hurt nothing. In the meantime, I'm going to cut up some vegetables and get my chicken diced up. Fold this back up. Put it back in the bowl and cover it up, and I'll be back in a little while. Okay, my stock has been simmering for a couple of 3 hours. I ain't sure exactly how long. I've been messing around all afternoon with a bunch of other things, and we've come to the point where we're ready to strain the soup. For that you will need, oops, bumped my tripod, a strainer, of course. And I like to use this. This is a spatter shield. You put that on top of a frying pan when you're frying, and it keeps the grease from splattering all over the place. Handy little thing. But it's also made of an extremely fine stainless steel mesh, which works fantastic for straining soup. You can do this with cheesecloth too if you don't have something like this. Just line your colander with cheesecloth and pour the soup through, which I have sitting right here. You want to be very careful because this is quite hot. Pour your liquid through first and let that drain before you dump in too much of the skin and bones, and that'll keep you from getting splashed. And we'll let that sit and drip through for a few minutes, get all the juicy goodness out of it. Okay, we're back. You can see all the skin and bones that went through there. You can see what a nice job that does of catching all them little tiny bits and pieces out of your soup. And you get a nice clean broth. Now we'll let that sit a little bit and let the fat come to the top. Drumsticks don't have a whole lot of fat on them, so there shouldn't be very much. And you want to have some fat in your soup, because it just ain't chicken soup unless it's got some schmaltz in it. If there's a huge amount, we'll skim some off, but it doesn't look like we're going to have to. We'll get this back on the stove, and we will carry on with the next step. Okay, now that we got the soup strained, things will start coming together fairly quickly. I'm going to add some more water. I want to have about 4 quarts or so by the time all is said and done. And at this point we are going to season this. I'm going to add some bouillon powder or bouillon cubes or soup base, whatever you have. Add that to taste. Take a fair bit because we got quite a bit of liquid. A little more. See how that does. Salt and pepper it. And we can adjust things more as we need to later. But get that stirred in. Give it a taste. Not too bad. Needs a little bit more salt and a little bit more bouillon. Come on, you break up. There you go. Try it again. Yeah, that's about right. We can always adjust it more later. While I was waiting before, I cut up some celery. Put that in. Some carrots. And I diced up my chicken. Put all of that in there. Try not to do that. Give everything a stir, and we'll bring this back to a boil. I got to move my camera again. Once I got that done, I'll start rolling out the noodles and cutting them. And you want to let this boil for about 10 minutes. You want to make sure your carrots are done and everything is all heated through. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, I got my dough out after it rested the last time and got her unfolded. I'm going to roll it out one last time to its final thickness. How thick you want to make your noodles is up to you, but roll it down until it's about 1/8 of an inch thick is usually about right. Get these rolled out. For some reason I wound up with a weird shape, but that doesn't really matter too much, because we're going to roll her out nice and thin. Move it over some. And it all makes noodles anyway, so what shape it is now really doesn't matter. A bit run over the edge there. Just rip it right off. Okay, that's rolled out where I want it to be. What I do now is pull it back, sprinkle just a little bit of flour, get her under the other side, because that way when I cut this, it'll let go of the table a little better. Grab your handy dandy pizza cutter and have at it. I'll edit this so you don't have to watch me going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth a zillion times with the pizza cutter. But you get the idea. If you have one of them pasta rolling machines and you want to use that to make these noodles, shame on you. This ain't pasta. These are noodles, damn it. Don't forget it. And there's my noodles cut. This hasn't come back to a boil yet, so we'll let that go do its thing. And like I say, let her boil for about 10 minutes to cook the carrots and celery and make sure the chicken's hot all the way through. And I'll be back in a little while. Alright, we are in the home stretch. The broth is all seasoned up. The vegetables have been simmering for about 10-12 minutes. They're cooked through. The noodles are all cut. That means we are ready to throw the noodles in. Just kind of break them up a little bit as you throw them in. These cook real fast. By the time you get the last noodles in, the first noodles will be more than cooked. When I said this isn't pasta, I meant it. What you end up with making noodles like this is something much more akin to riffles. If you don't know what riffles are, you have led a sad and sheltered life, and I pity you for it. As soon as we get these here all in, we'll have soup. And they're coming up nice. You don't have to go through the trouble of separating each and every one of the noodles when you throw it in, because, let me try and get a little bit readjustment here. There we go, now you can see down into there. Because they'll usually separate out pretty good inside the pot. Bring that up to a boil again once it warms up the noodles, and I'll be back in a minute and show you the finished product. Alright, after you get the last of your noodles in, let it boil for 2 or 3 minutes. That's really all you need. And now she's cooled off a little bit, I'll dish some up and show you what we end up with. You want to get all the way to the bottom, get plenty of chicken and veggies. Hopefully the steam will clear enough that you can see it. But that is beautiful chicken noodle soup with genuine homemade, handmade, hand-cut noodles. And you want to be a little more careful than I was making it, because had I not just added the cold water to the broth when I dropped that bowl in there, I would have burnt the living shit out of myself. With that warning in mind, good night.